Emma Wilson's lungs burned as she ran, her sneakers pounding against the dry earth of Old Miller's Trail. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the creosote bushes and mesquite trees, painting the desert path with flickers of gold and fear. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her chest tightening with every step. Behind her, the sound that had haunted her for the last 100 yards grew louder, the rhythmic thunder of heavy paws. "Please, God," she whispered between gulps of scorching air, "don't let it get me." She didn't dare look back again. She already knew what was there. A massive dog, nearly 100 pounds of muscle and scars, with eyes that seemed to glow, and a growl that felt like it came from the deepest pit of her. Nightmares. Its panting was close now. Too close. Just 10 minutes ago, Emma had been walking quietly, sketchbook in hand, following the familiar trail she'd discovered months ago when her family first moved to Pinewood Creek, Arizona. This was her private escape. A place where the noise of her parents' arguments and the sadness that never seemed to leave their house couldn't reach her. Here, surrounded by scrubland and silence, she felt a little less invisible. But everything changed when she heard the barking. It wasn't just barking, it was the sound of chaos. Dogs fighting, men shouting. Something terrible happening not far from the trail. Curiosity had led her toward the sound. What she saw in that clearing, 3 chained pit bulls, the Conway brothers laughing as they hurled rocks, blood on the dirt, sent her heart into overdrive. Then, she saw it. A 4th dog, not chained, larger than the others. Covered in dust and battle scars, it looked at her, eyes narrowing. And then it ran. Emma ran too. Terror clawed at her chest as she fled. The image of that dog, those teeth, that snarl, burned into her mind. Every step she took, she was sure it was gaining. She could feel the vibrations through the ground, the sharp breath behind her neck. The memories she had fought for years surged back. A dog bite years ago. Blood on her arm. The shriek of her own voice. The sensation of teeth breaking skin. She had barely survived that encounter, and she had never been the same. Now the nightmare was back, and it was bigger, faster, and angrier. Branches tore at her arms and legs as she pushed herself through the underbrush. Her backpack bounced violently against her spine. She didn't know where she was going anymore, just that she had to keep going. Suddenly, she stumbled. A rock caught her foot, and her knees hit the ground with a jolt. For a second, she couldn't move. Dust filled her mouth and nose. Pain bloomed across her palms. She twisted her body and looked behind her. There it was, less than 10 feet away. The scarred dog, its tongue lolled from its mouth, teeth bared, eyes locked on hers. She screamed. But what Emma Wilson didn't know in that moment, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that the monster chasing her wasn't trying to kill her. It wasn't hunting her. It was trying to save her. And this terrifying chase through the desert brush would become the beginning of a story no one in Pinewood Creek would ever forget. Not about a vicious stray, but about a hero, a protector, and a girl who would discover that sometimes what looks like a monster is actually the miracle you never knew you needed. Six months before that terrifying day, the Wilson family rolled into Pinewood Creek under a sky as empty as their bank account. The sun glared down on the cracked asphalt road that led to the eastern edge of town, where their newly rented ranch house stood like a relic from a forgotten era. With its peeling paint, sagging roofline, and a porch that creaked with every breeze, the place wasn't much, but it was all they could afford. Tom Wilson, once a promising investment consultant in Phoenix, had lost everything in the economic collapse of his firm. One bad quarter had wiped out their savings, their status, and his sense of direction. Diane, his wife, had taken the fall with quiet resilience, finding part-time remote work as a data entry clerk. But it was their daughter, Emma, who bore the move like a wound that refused to close. At 12, Emma had just begun to bloom in her private school's advanced art program. She'd had friends, exhibitions, and a future she could see taking shape with every sketch she drew. But Pinewood Creek had no art program, no exhibitions, and the only friends she'd found were the birds and bushes she drew in her battered sketchbook. Pinewood Creek wasn't on most maps. Tucked between desert mesas and forgotten trails, the town had a population just shy of 2,000, and a culture rooted in survival. People here valued land over luxury, space over connection. The neighbors were polite but distant. Conversations rarely went deeper than weather or tools. Emma kept to herself, wandering the margins of town when she wasn't at the small combined middle high school. Her sketchbook, a worn, leather-bound volume with frayed corners, became her constant companion. She filled it with desert landscapes, imagined creatures, and endless variations of the sky at dusk. Yet there was one recurring image that showed up more and more frequently in her drawings: a lone dog watching from a distance. That image had a source, not from her imagination, but from life. Some evenings she would see him from her bedroom window, a large German Shepherd mix, with a scar slashing down the right side of his face, like something from a storybook villain. He never came close to the house, always keeping to the edge of the property line, just watching. Sometimes he would vanish into the mesquite as suddenly as he'd appeared, Emma told her parents once. "There's a huge dog out back," she'd said. But Tom had brushed it off. "Probably someone's farm dog, just ignore it," she tried. But she couldn't, because years earlier, Emma had been attacked. It was a sunny afternoon in Phoenix. She'd been playing barefoot in the backyard when she stepped on her neighbor's sleeping German Shepherd's tail. The dog had reacted on instinct, turning and biting her before anyone could intervene. The scars on her forearm were faint now, but the fear had never faded. Even the sight of a dog could make her chest tighten. So when she saw the scarred dog watching her from the brush, her first reaction wasn't curiosity. It was dread. Across town, in a ramshackle cottage nestled beside Miller's Creek, lived a woman most folks called crazy behind her back, but always with respect. Martha Jenkins was 80 years old, lean as barbed wire and sharp as a tack. Her past was the stuff of town legend. Some said she'd trained military dogs. Others said she'd been in law enforcement. The truth was simpler and more extraordinary. Martha had been one of the first female canine trainers in the western U.S. She'd lived alone since her husband passed, filling her solitude with purpose. And part of that purpose was caring for strays. Quietly, without fanfare, she left food and water at the edge of the creek. Injured animals somehow found their way to her doorstep, and she nursed them, rehabilitated them, and when possible, found them homes. That scarred German Shepherd. She knew him, called him Ranger. He wasn't hers, not officially. He had belonged to her late friend Franklin Miller, a retired firefighter who had spent his last years training Ranger in search and rescue work. The dog had been a prodigy, intuitive, focused, loyal. But after Franklin's sudden death, Ranger had disappeared into the wild. The townsfolk called him a ghost. Kids swapped stories about seeing him in the canyon or near the water tower. Most were afraid. Some said he had turned savage, but Martha knew better. "He's still working," she often muttered to herself. "Just doesn't have a handler anymore." Meanwhile, trouble festered in another corner of town. The Conway brothers, Tyler, Marcus, and Levi, had inherited their father's temper and none of his work ethic. Since their old man skipped town the year before, they'd filled the void with chaos. Illegal bonfires, vandalism, fights, and worse. Their property, a decaying farmstead north of town, had become a haven for dogfighting and God knew what else. Most in town looked the other way. Sheriff Mike Callahan had tried to intervene, but with limited evidence and even fewer resources, he could only monitor and wait. He knew something was brewing, but he didn't know what or who would end up lighting the fuse. That fuse was already burning, and Emma Wilson, with her sketchbook and quiet eyes, was walking straight into its fire. The day Emma took Old Miller's Trail alone, the sky had been unusually still. The wind, often whispering through the desert brush, had quieted, and the sun baked the dirt path with unwavering heat. Her parents were deep in another whispered argument back at the house. Job prospects, overdue bills. the weight of unspoken fears building behind closed doors. Emma, exhausted by the heaviness, had slipped out without a word. Her sneakers crunched on gravel as she made her way past familiar mesquite trees and sun-bleached stones. She carried her backpack lightly, just a water bottle, a granola bar, and her sketchbook. She knew the trail like the lines in her palm. It led to Crystal Creek, where a bend in the rocks created a hidden hollow perfect for drawing. But that day, something felt off. A hush in the air, a sense of being watched. She was 3/4 of a mile in when she heard them. Voices. Male voices, loud and careless, laughing with an edge that made her shoulders tense. She paused, ducked behind a thick creosote bush, and listened. 50 points if you hit it in the eye, one of them said. Shut up and watch how it's done. Came another, deeper and crueler. The Conway brothers. Emma's stomach dropped. She recognized their tones instantly. Tyler's drawl, Marcus's hoarse snicker, Levi's high-pitched attempts at bravado. She crept closer, peering through the brush. In a clearing ahead, the three stood around something. No. Someone. At first she couldn't see, but then the form moved, and she realized with horror it was a dog, chained, panting, flinching with every rock they hurled. Their truck blared music, masking the small yelps of pain. Emma's heart pounded. She knew she should go back, tell someone, but her legs wouldn't move, not out of fear, out of anger. Then one of the rocks hit its mark, and the dog let out a cry so human, so raw, Emma gasped aloud. She clapped a hand over her mouth. Too late. What was that? Levi's voice pierced the air. Shut up, Tyler said. You hear something? Emma crouched lower. She could hear her own pulse in her ears. Slowly, she backed away, keeping low. She didn't notice the rock. Behind her foot, it shifted. Snap, over there, she turned and ran. Her heart thundered as she tore through the brush. Behind her, the boys shouted, commands, insults. But it wasn't their footsteps she heard chasing her. It was growling, low, deep, angry. She looked over her shoulder just once, and that was enough. 3 pit bulls, unchained. Foam around their mouths. Dust kicking up under powerful legs. The Conway brothers had brought fighting dogs. And now they were loose. Emma ran like her life depended on it, because it did. She took a sharp turn toward a side trail, her lungs burning. Behind her, the barking closed in. But there was something else. A flash of motion from the brush. A 4th figure. It was huge, scarred. Ranger. She had no name for him then, only the image of that monstrous dog leaping from the shadows straight. At her, she screamed, veering off the trail into thicker brush. Thorns scratched her arms, and she nearly dropped her backpack. The snarls behind her were louder now, close enough to feel. She didn't know how many were chasing her anymore. Then came the sounds. Terrible sounds. Yelping. A crash. Snarls, turning into whimpers. Was it fighting? Were the dogs turning on each other? She didn't stop to think. She just ran. But no matter how fast she moved, the sound of paws never disappeared. One dog was still behind her. And in her panic, Emma never noticed that it wasn't chasing to harm. It was guiding. Ranger, trained years ago to rescue the lost, was now using his instincts to steer her, away from the Conway property, away from the chained dogs, away from the trap. But Emma, locked in fear, couldn't see it. Every time Ranger darted in front of her to block a dangerous path, she interpreted it as aggression. When he growled at a shadow in the trees, she thought he was warning her. When he cut off her escape, she thought he was stalking her. It wasn't until she stumbled into a clearing and saw the Conway brothers again, this time with another pit bull on a chain, that she realized she'd run straight into the lions. Look what we got here, Tyler sneered. Little Miss Wilson out where she don't belong. Emma froze. Behind her, Ranger emerged, chest heaving, blood on his fur, not hers. She turned. In that split second, she thought, this is how I die. Then Ranger lunged, but not at her. At the pit bull. The world exploded into snarls and dust. Emma didn't wait. She turned and fled again, blindly. She didn't realize the dog behind her wasn't the threat. It was the one saving her life. Bill Hawkins had been tending his roses when he saw her. A blur of blonde hair, a streak of dirt and fear hurtling down Cottonwood Road, stumbling, gasping. Behind her, a shadow moved, big, fast, and determined. The old man's first instinct was confusion, then alarm. "Help!" the girl croaked, collapsing into his yard. By the time Bill reached her, a massive dog emerged from the brush, scarred, eyes alert. Bill grabbed his garden hose and stood between the child and the beast. "Get back," he barked, spraying water. The dog didn't charge, didn't flinch. It paced instead, gaze flicking between Emma and the road. When the Conway truck appeared minutes later, everything made sense. Emma tugged at Bill's sleeve. "They're after me. Him too. Please." Bill got her inside just as Ranger planted himself at the property's edge. From behind the screened porch, Emma watched in disbelief. The dog wasn't chasing her anymore. He was guarding. Bill called her parents, called the sheriff. The story began to spread. Across town, Martha Jenkins lowered her binoculars, murmured, "Lord have mercy," and reached for her cane and truck keys. She knew that posture, knew that stance. Ranger wasn't attacking. He was holding the line at the sheriff's station. Mike Callahan had heard the name Conway and was already pulling up files when the call came through. Fighting dogs. A girl in danger. A known stray intervening. Too many puzzle pieces too fast. Within 20 minutes, he had the brothers stopped on Highway 16. 2 injured pit bulls in the truck. A wrench. A half-empty bottle of something flammable. And one very loud Tyler Conway already spinning lies. "That dog's a menace, killed my pets." "What about the girl?" "What girl?" Tyler smirked. But Marcus flinched. Back on Juniper Lane, 3 patrol cars arrived at Bill's property. One from the north, one from the west. The last from the Wilsons, Tom with a rifle, Diane pale as chalk. Emma ran out. "Daddy, Tom saw the dog, raised the rifle. Don't move, honey, I got him." "Wait!" Emma screamed. "He's not hurting me." Ranger stood motionless, muscles tense, watching everyone. "Protecting." Bill added his voice. "That dog's been keeping the Conway boys from this house. I saw it myself." Martha's truck skidded into the drive. She leapt out with a binder and a laminated certificate. "Put the gun down, Tom Wilson." "That dog saved your daughter." Chaos exploded. Tyler reached into his truck bed. Mike shouted. Tom pivoted. The wrench flew. It hit Ranger with a sickening thud. The dog didn't move. Just stepped in front of Emma. Mike tackled Tyler, handcuffed him, ordered the others back. Deputies arrived and separated the remaining Conway brothers. As they were cuffed, Marcus blurted out, "She saw it. She saw everything." Emma clutched her backpack, nodding slowly. "I saw them hurting dogs. And fighting. Them." The truth began to unravel, slowly, carefully. Emma, trembling, explained what had happened. "He wasn't chasing me. He was guiding me, blocking me from danger." Sheriff Callahan raised an eyebrow. "How do you know?" Emma's voice steadied. "When I fell, he stood between me and the other dogs. When I tried to run toward the Conway place, he blocked. When I was in the clearing, he attacked their dog, not me." Martha stepped forward, opened the binder. "His name is Ranger. He was a certified search and rescue dog. Best in the state, trained to protect, not attack." The crowd murmured. A few stepped forward. "I seen that dog by the creek," said Mr. Finch. "Never once acted aggressive." "He's the ghost dog," another added. "Been around for years. Kept varmints off my chickens," someone else muttered. Sheriff Callahan glanced between the dog and the crowd. "Heard reports of a big shepherd fighting off pit bulls earlier. Near the creek." "That's him," Bill added. "Been standing guard since she ran in." Tom lowered the rifle, ashamed. Diane joined Emma, wrapping an arm around her. The girl stepped closer to Ranger. The dog didn't flinch, didn't move. Then, with infinite gentleness, he leaned forward and rested his chin on her knee. The whole yard seemed to exhale. Martha whispered, "Looks like he's chosen his new handler." For the first time in hours, Emma smiled. Not out of relief, out of recognition. This wasn't a monster. This was a guardian, and he had never once left her side. The Wilson house was quiet that night, but it wasn't peaceful. Ranger lay stretched out on the back porch, his right shoulder swelling from the wrench strike. He had refused the cushion Tom laid out for him, preferring the cool wood beneath, his belly. His breathing was shallow but steady. His eyes stayed alert. Inside, the family moved like shadows. Tom, who had nearly pulled the trigger on the dog that saved his daughter. Diane, who paced the kitchen with a phone in hand, updating Martha, the sheriff, the veterinarian. And Emma, who sat near the screen door, sketchbook in her lap, but no pencil in hand. She couldn't draw. Not tonight. Shouldn't we take him to a vet now? Emma asked quietly, her voice raw. Dr. Thornton's coming first thing in the morning, Diane answered gently. She said moving him tonight might cause more harm. He's stable, and he won't let anyone touch him right now. He let me, Emma said. Tom, standing by the door, sighed. You're the only one he trusts right now. The guilt sat heavy in his chest. He had aimed a gun at the one creature who had done more to protect his daughter than he had. And now, that same dog lay injured under his roof because of him. Emma crawled out onto the porch. She moved slowly, her bare feet whispering against the boards. Ranger lifted his head slightly but didn't growl. Didn't flinch. She sat beside him. Not too close. I was scared of you, she whispered. You looked like the dog that bit me. I thought you were chasing me to hurt me. Ranger's ear twitched. Emma pulled a granola bar from her pocket and unwrapped it. She set it down between them and slid it closer. He didn't eat, but he didn't back away. That night, Emma fell, asleep on the porch, her head resting near his paws. When Tom came to check on her before dawn, he found them like that. His daughter curled in trust, and the dog who had once been feared now standing guard in silence. Dr. Thornton arrived just after sunrise. Ranger didn't resist. Emma kept a hand on his head while the vet examined the shoulder. The bruise was deep, but nothing appeared broken. She cleaned the area, applied ointment, and gave him an anti-inflammatory shot. He's malnourished, the vet noted, and exhausted. But more than that, he's running on adrenaline. If he doesn't rest soon, the damage won't be from the wrench. It'll be from collapse. Emma nodded. How do we make him rest? You can't, Dr. Thornton replied. He has to decide it's safe. Later that day, Sheriff Callahan visited with updates. The Conway brothers were facing a mountain of charges: illegal animal fighting, trespassing, assault. And thanks to Emma's testimony and the physical evidence found at their property, the case was solid. But Tyler Conway had powerful friends. The sheriff didn't say it outright, but the implication hung heavy. There could be retaliation. Tom increased the home security. Neighbors brought over motion lights and reinforced locks. The town, once distant, now circled the Wilsons in quiet solidarity. Someone even dropped off a fresh bag of dog food with no note attached. But Ranger wouldn't eat. He patrolled the property slowly, favoring his wounded side. At night, he laid outside Emma's door, and she often found herself whispering to him, through the crack beneath it, "Just sleep, I'm safe now." But he wouldn't rest, not really. Days passed. Then came the break-in. It was subtle. A broken window in the kitchen, a man in a black hoodie, a syringe in hand. He hadn't expected Ranger. The dog launched from the hallway like a cannonball. Emma screamed. Tom grabbed his rifle. The sheriff's voice shouted from the driveway. He had pulled up at the exact moment. And then a single gunshot rang out. Emma's world narrowed to one sound: a yelp. Ranger collapsed. The intruder was cuffed, subdued, and removed. He was a known associate of the Conway ring. The syringe had enough sedative to kill a horse, but all Emma could see was blood. "Stay with me," she whispered, her hands pressing down on his wound. Dr. Thornton arrived within minutes. Martha came too, binder clutched in her arms. He saved her again, she said to no one in particular. They loaded Ranger into the back of Tom's truck, Emma riding beside him, hand never leaving his fur. At the clinic, the surgery began. A bullet had pierced Ranger's chest, missing his heart by millimeters. They removed it, stopped the bleeding, but the trauma was immense. The next 24 hours are critical, the vet said. Emma didn't leave his side. She stayed through the night, whispering stories into his ears, about art shows she wanted to enter, about the friends she might try to make, about how much she wanted him to come home. "You can't give up now," she said, voice shaking. "I need you." As the first light of dawn broke through the window, Ranger's tail moved. Just once, but it was enough. Emma let herself cry for the first time, not from fear, but from hope. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air of the Pinewood Creek Veterinary Clinic. The ticking of the clock on the wall became Emma's heartbeat, measured, persistent, each second daring the worst to happen. Ranger lay motionless on a blanket in the back examination room, tubes connecting him to fluids, sensors blinking quietly like stars in the dark. His chest rose and fell, each breath shallow but stubborn. Emma sat cross-legged beside him, refusing to sleep. She hadn't changed out of her dusty jeans or eaten since the night before. Dr. Thornton had offered a cot in the break room. So had Martha. But Emma only shook her head. "I'll stay right here. He stayed for me." Martha left a small thermos of soup and patted Emma's shoulder. "Just talk to him, sweetheart. They say dogs hear everything, even from the edge." So Emma talked. She told him about the first time she saw him, how terrified she'd been, how wrong she was. She told him about her sketchbook, about the hundreds of unfinished drawings, and how now she wanted to draw just one thing: him. She told him about her fear, about the bite from years ago, about how it had shaped her, shrunk her, how she thought she'd never stop being afraid. Until him. "I think you saved more than my life," she whispered. "You saved the part of me I thought was gone." Ranger stirred almost imperceptibly, a twitch in his paw, a faint sigh. Emma leaned in, heart leaping. "That's it. You're still in there." The clinic was quiet. Outside, the desert wind howled faintly, but within these four walls a kind of peace settled. Emma rested her head gently on Ranger's side, just above the soft hum of his heartbeat. Hours passed. Sunrise spilled gold through the blinds. Dr. Thornton came in, checked vitals, nodded. "He's fighting." Tom and Diane arrived with fresh clothes and food Emma barely acknowledged. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "You're the bravest person I've ever known." Sheriff Callahan stopped by, too. He knelt beside Ranger, laying one heavy hand on the dog's good shoulder. "We've got him on record now, as a hero, not a stray." That afternoon, Ranger opened his eyes. Emma gasped, blinking away tears. "Hey there," she said gently. "I told you I'd stay." His gaze was slow, foggy, but when he saw her, something shifted. His tail, still faint, thumped against the floor once. It was enough. Recovery would be slow. He couldn't walk yet. He couldn't bark. But he was awake, present. Emma stayed by his side each day. She read to him from her sketchbook. She brought him bits of boiled chicken. She stroked his head when nightmares made his legs twitch. The clinic became a second home. Staff left her fresh towels and snacks. Other patients' owners whispered about the girl and the ghost dog. Word spread through town. People stopped by to leave notes, dog treats, flowers. "Thank you for protecting her. He saved a life. He's one of us." Even Principal Alvarez from school sent a card. Inside was a note. "Your bravery humbles us. We're planning something for you both." By the end of the week, Ranger was strong enough to sit up. Emma had brought her sketch pad. She flipped to a fresh page and started to draw. She began with the eyes. Not just the color, but the look, the trust, the story inside them. Ranger watched, her draw ears twitching. "I'm going to show everyone who you are," she promised. "Not just a shadow in the woods, not a monster, a hero." Dr. Thornton gave the all-clear by week's end. Ranger could go home under supervision. He needed rest, soft foods, minimal stimulation. The Wilsons prepared the living room with pillows and a bed. The entire space turned into a recovery den. That first night home, Ranger slept beside Emma's bed. He didn't wake once. The first morning back home, the Wilson house smelled like scrambled eggs and oatmeal. Tom had gotten up early to cook, determined to do something normal again. The weight of the last few weeks still hung in the air, but there was also something lighter, a thread of gratitude woven through the tension. Ranger lay in the sunspot by the window, his body half stretched, bandages visible beneath soft blankets. He didn't try to move much, but his ears twitched at every sound, his eyes tracking Emma wherever she went. He was home. Emma took on the role of caregiver with the seriousness of a nurse. She followed Dr. Thornton's instructions to the letter, feeding him boiled chicken and rice, wiping his paw pads gently, cleaning the edges of the wound. When it was time to give him his meds, she'd hold his muzzle softly and whisper, "You can trust me." And he did. Every day his strength grew. Slowly, but visibly, he began standing on his own again, limping to the door to greet visitors. He barked for the first time 3 days after returning home, a short, rusty woof that startled Tom and made Emma laugh until she cried. Neighbors stopped by almost daily. Some brought treats, others brought old dog toys or offered help. Didn't think I'd ever see that old ghost dog tamed down, said Mr. Finch, shaking his head in wonder. Martha came every other day with books about training and healing. She sat on the porch with Tom, sometimes in silence, sometimes with stories. "I saw a dog once take a bullet in the chest for a firefighter," she said one afternoon. "The man called him his guardian angel. I think Emma's got one of those. Now, too." Inside, Emma was drawing. Ranger lay beside her, his head resting on her lap as she worked. The sketch she was finishing wasn't just any drawing. It was a scene from that night. Not the fear, not the chase, but the moment Ranger placed his head on her knee, eyes full of trust. She titled it, "Recognition." School sent her assignments to complete at home. Her art teacher included a handwritten note. "When you're ready, I'd love to see what you've been working on." Emma wrote back with a photo of the drawing. It was soon displayed in the school hallway under a banner that read, "Bravery comes in many forms." But healing wasn't just physical. Sometimes Emma would wake up with a gasp, memories of snarling, pit bulls still flashing in her dreams. Other times she'd freeze when she heard loud barking from the neighbor's yard. Each time, Ranger would nudge her gently. A soft nose, a steady gaze, a reminder. She wasn't alone anymore. Ranger began, showing signs of restlessness. He followed Emma everywhere, but now with more energy. He would sit by the door, ears alert. He barked at shadows, chased off stray coyotes. He was recovering, but still working. "His instincts won't turn off," Martha said. "Dogs like him, they need purpose. Otherwise, they carry their scars, like anchors." That's when she brought up the idea. "Emma, would you consider training with him? Officially? He's got the drive. You've got the bond." Emma's eyes widened. "You mean like a service dog?" "More than that," Martha nodded. "A team." The family sat around the kitchen table that night, going over logistics. It would take time. Certification, evaluations, training hours. But it was possible. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Tom asked her gently. Emma looked down at Ranger, who was curled at her feet. "I've never been more sure of anything." Martha arranged for specialized sessions with a handler from the state capitol. Emma committed fully, waking up early, following commands, teaching and learning alongside Ranger. The sessions weren't easy. Some days, Ranger got frustrated. Some days, Emma did, but they never gave up. One afternoon during a trust drill, Ranger hesitated at a command. Emma crouched beside him. "I know it's hard," she said, "but you don't have to protect me all the time now. Just be with me." He sat, lifted his paw, placed it gently in her hand. That was the day they passed the first benchmark. By late October, they were scheduled for an evaluation. Martha drove them to the facility, her old pickup rumbling over the hills. Emma sat in the back with Ranger, running her fingers through his thick coat. "Think they'll believe he used to be a ghost dog?" she joked. "Only if you tell them," Martha smiled. At the center, a panel of evaluators tested their coordination. Verbal commands, nonverbal cues, emergency response. When Ranger responded to Emma's faint whistle and pulled her away from a mock fire hazard, the judges exchanged nods. "Certified," one said. Emma beamed. Ranger wagged his tail. On the ride home, the desert stretched before them, vast, open, full of unseen paths. Emma looked out the window, Ranger's head resting beside her. "I think we're finally healing," she said softly. And this time, she didn't mean just him. Emma stood outside the courthouse, clutching Ranger's leash with one hand and her sketchbook with the other. The morning air was cold, but her palms were sweating. Inside, the hearing was about to begin. Pinewood Creek's courthouse was small, barely more than a large meeting room in a converted municipal building. But today, it held a weight that far exceeded its size. Journalists from nearby towns had gathered. Animal welfare officers, school officials, even strangers who had heard about the girl and the ghost dog. Emma took a deep breath. Ranger looked up at her, tail swaying gently. His presence grounded. "Are you ready?" Tom asked, his hand resting on her shoulder. Emma nodded. She had to be. The courtroom buzzed as she entered. The Conway brothers sat in the front, flanked by their lawyer. Tyler looked defiant. Levi stared at the floor. Marcus wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. Sheriff Callahan sat with the prosecution, nodding slightly when Emma passed. Martha was there too, arms folded, face set like stone. When the judge called her name, Emma walked to the witness stand. Ranger stayed at her side, his vest now marked with a patch that read, "Certified Companion." "State your name," the judge instructed. "Emma Wilson." Her voice didn't shake. Over the next 20 minutes, she told her story. How she had followed the trail, what she saw in the clearing, the pain in the dog's cries, the chase, the misunderstanding. The moment she realized Ranger wasn't the threat, he was the shield. She showed her drawings, descriptions of the Conways' property, sketches of the chained pit bulls, the clearing, the weapons she'd seen. When the defense tried to rattle her, she stayed calm. "No, sir, I'm not mistaken. I saw them throwing rocks. I heard them laughing." Tyler shifted in his seat. The court fell silent when she described the break-in. "They sent someone after us," she said, "and Ranger took the bullet meant for me." The judge glanced at the bailiff. The room tensed. After the testimony, Emma sat down. Ranger curled at her feet. The courtroom exhaled. The prosecution followed up with evidence. Photos from the sheriff's investigation, vet records, recovered footage from an old cell phone found on Levi. Then came the sentence. The judge delivered it without flourish. Multiple years in state prison for Tyler, probation and mandatory counseling for Marcus and Levi, animal cruelty charges, firearm violations, conspiracy. It was over. Outside, reporters swarmed. Emma didn't stop to talk. She knelt beside Ranger, buried. Her hands in his fur. "You did it," she whispered. "We did." That night, the town held a quiet gathering at the school gym. A potluck, part celebration, part relief. Someone printed a giant poster of Emma and Ranger under the words, "Courage comes in many forms." Principal Alvarez called her to the stage. Emma hesitated. Ranger nudged her forward. She stood before the crowd, not with a speech, but with a drawing. It showed Ranger standing between a young girl and a storm, wind whipping around him, lightning in the background. But the girl stood. Calm, she held up the drawing. "I used to be afraid of dogs," she said. "But what I feared wasn't dogs. It was hurt. Ranger showed me that healing is louder than fear, and that sometimes the thing that looks scary is actually what saves you." The room applauded. A few cried. From that day forward, Emma and Ranger became something of local icons. They were invited to school assemblies to talk about compassion. Sheriff Callahan used their story to launch a town-wide animal protection initiative. Emma's sketches were featured in the regional paper. One headline read, "The Girl Who Drew Courage," but beneath the recognition was something deeper: responsibility. Emma didn't want Ranger to just be a symbol. She wanted their bond to do more, so she signed up for outreach programs. With Martha's help, she began studying trauma response, animal behavior. She wanted to help kids like her, ones who had been bitten, abandoned, scared. Ranger learned too, how to comfort children in hospitals, how to stay calm in crowds, how to sit still while little hands trembled against his fur. He wore a new vest, now blue with yellow embroidery. Therapy partner. One of their first visits was to the local children's hospital. In the cancer ward, a boy who hadn't spoken in days whispered his first words while petting Ranger's head. "He's not scary," the boy said. "No," Emma replied, smiling. "He's not." Every time they visited, Emma carried her sketchbook. She drew portraits of the kids with Ranger. She gave each one away, personalized with their names. In giving her art, she gave pieces of healing. Yet the journey wasn't easy. Some days, Emma felt the weight of what she'd seen, the cruelty, the fear, the scar it had left on her soul. But then she'd look at Ranger, still beside her, still steady, and she remembered. She wasn't carrying it alone. Spring came early to Pinewood Creek. The desert bloomed with wildflowers, orange poppies and purple lupine coloring the trails Emma once feared to walk. Now, those paths were where she and Ranger trained, walked, and connected. But their days no longer revolved around survival. They revolved around service. Ranger wore his therapy vest proudly now. The ghost dog had become something real, known, trusted, even loved. And Emma, once shy and shadowed, had become the girl who walked into rooms with calm confidence, always with her companion a few steps behind. Every Tuesday and Thursday, they visited the elementary school. Ranger would sit in a reading circle, his chin resting on a child's knee while soft voices stumbled through storybooks. Kids who struggled to read would volunteer just for the chance to sit beside him. "He doesn't care if I mess up," one girl said. "Exactly," Emma smiled. "He listens anyway." On Fridays, they went to the local library's quiet hour, where children with sensory sensitivities could pet Ranger in silence. Emma brought sketchbooks and helped them draw what they felt, even if they didn't have words for it. Martha, now both mentor and friend, said often, "You gave him a second life, Emma, but maybe he gave you your first." Emma nodded. She knew it was true, and yet she also felt something stirring, a new desire, not just to help others, but to tell stories. One afternoon, she asked Tom, "What if I made a book about him, about what happened?" Her father looked up from his laptop, surprised. "You mean like a real book?" Emma opened her sketchbook. Inside was the beginning of something. Rough drafts, panel layouts, a few pages with words scribbled in the margins. "Not a fairy tale," she said. "The real story, but from his eyes." Tom blinked. "Emma, that's incredible." They worked together every weekend. Diane edited the drafts. Tom helped format pages. They researched publishers. Even the sheriff wrote a foreword. By summer, they had a manuscript. Its title, "The Dog Who Saved Me from My Fear." Emma wasn't aiming for fame, but she wanted kids like her to know they weren't alone. That sometimes, what scares us the most is where the healing begins. A small press in Flagstaff picked it up. Within weeks of release, the book sold out its first printing. Libraries requested copies. Bookstores asked for signings. Emma and Ranger hit the road modestly. Local schools, county fairs, shelters. The message was always the same. Fear can be loud, but courage can be quiet and loyal and four-legged. One evening, as they returned home from a book event, Emma noticed something unusual. A young boy sat on their porch, alone, nervous, holding a crumpled flyer. "Are you Emma?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes, and this is Ranger." The boy's eyes widened, then brimmed with tears. My mom said you help kids who got hurt by dogs. I need help. Emma knelt. You're safe here. Ranger padded forward, slow and calm. The boy didn't flinch. In fact, he reached out, hesitant but open. And just like that, another healing began. It happened again and again. Letters came, emails, quiet knocks on the door. Emma wasn't just the girl with the miracle dog anymore. She had become a source of light. Not all days were easy. Ranger still had his scars. So did Emma. Some nights, storms stirred old panic. Some walks brought back old images, but they had each other. And together they faced forward. A year after that fateful chase through Old Miller's Trail, Emma stood again at its edge. She held Ranger's leash. This time she wasn't afraid. They walked the path slowly. Birds chirped. The wind whispered. Emma paused at the spot she remembered falling. "Thank you," she whispered. Ranger leaned into her leg. They continued walking. Ahead was more than trail. It was a future they'd chosen. Together. In the quiet moments, before the school bell rang, before the next hospital visit, before the next letter arrived, Emma would sometimes look at Ranger and marvel at the mystery of it all. How something so terrifying had turned into something so sacred. She'd been running from a monster, but the monster wasn't the dog behind her. It was the fear inside her. And when Ranger chased her that day, it wasn't to harm. It was to save. The town never forgot their story. Pinewood Creek changed. The old trail where it all began was renamed Ranger's Path. A small wooden sign carved by the local Boy Scouts now marked the place where Emma had fallen, and Ranger had stood guard. Beneath it, a quote from Emma's book. Sometimes the thing that scares you the most is what saves you in the end. Visitors came from out of town to walk that trail, to take photos with the sign, to leave behind notes, messages to lost pets, stories of bravery, drawings from children. It had become a place of memory and meaning. For Emma, it was more than history. It was a beginning. At night, when the stars stretched endlessly above the desert, Emma would sit on the porch with Ranger beside her and dream bigger. Maybe another book. Maybe a rescue foundation. Maybe just another trail to explore. Another child to help. But always with him. Ranger had grown older. His muzzle had grayed. He no longer chased shadows. He didn't need to. His work had become something deeper. He had become more than protector. He was a partner, a constant, a miracle in motion. And even if the world one day forgot his name, Emma never would, because every step forward she took, from fear to freedom, from silence to voice, had been carved alongside his paw prints. And when people asked, as they often did, how did it all begin? She would smile softly and say, "It began with a dog behind me that I thought was chasing me to hurt me, but he wasn't. He was chasing me because he knew what I didn't, that something worse was coming and that I was worth saving." Stay tuned. In the next chapter of this story, we'll follow Emma and Ranger as they take on their first real mission outside of Pinewood Creek, one that will test everything they've learned and the bond they've built. Don't miss the beginning of their next journey. Subscribe for Part 2, The Search Beyond the Creek.